Εις το όνομα του Πατρός και του Υιού και του Αγίου Πνεύματος. Αμήν. Βασιλεύ ουράνιε, παράκλητε το πνεύμα της αληθείας, ο πανταχού παρών και τα πάντα πληρών, ο θησαυρός των αγαθών και ζωής χορηγός, ελθέ και σκήνωσον εν ημίν, και καθάρισον ημάς ο πας κυλίδος, και σώσον αγαθέ τας ψυχάς ημών. Αμήν.
Welcome everyone. Sorry, I'm just admitting a couple more people that are in the waiting room. So welcome everyone to tonight's talk. Tonight we will have Mr Arthur Katsogiannis APM presenting to us on parenting in the digital age. I would like to ask everyone, if you have questions, just write them in the message chat and one of us will read them out once we have time at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gia. Reverend Father and also His Grace Bishop Emilianos. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First I want to thank Father Athanasios and the St Catherine's Parents Group, along with His Grace Bishop Emilianos and the Go Family team and friends for giving me the opportunity to be able to present to you tonight on I think a topic that concerns all of us as parents, and that is the technology and the digital age that we live in and what our children are actually being confronted with, and which is also confronting for us as parents. As you're all aware, the topic is parenting in the digital age, and I'll start. So as Gia said, if you do have any questions, please leave them to the end. My presentation is between about 15 to 20 minutes. I've tried to, it's a very big topic, and obviously I can't talk about everything, but I just thought I'd talk about the more current situation that we're in at the moment, and give you a few tips and hints, and just look at some of the issues that are confronting all of us as parents and grandparents with the technological age. So, as technology use has increased over the past decade, so have the number of concerns about how it might impact the development of children, particularly when it comes to parenting in a digital age. Ultimately, we want to help our children safely and responsibly navigate this world. We want to help them minimise the risks and the pitfalls, but at the same time, allowing them to experience all the wonderful opportunities that technology has to offer them. To do this, we need to have knowledge about the technology, what it's capable of, and what are the sorts of things that children are doing with that technology. However, we also need to have some perspective and understanding about what it means to be a child growing up today. From cognitive and learning concerns to social and emotional concerns, parents are right to question the impact of something that consumes the time and energy of so many children. During the past 3 decades, digital technology has transformed our daily lives, revolutionising the world, but that revolution hasn't come without a price. While there are some great benefits to living in a digital-filled world, we also must consider some of the negative ways technology has affected our lives. Few things have ever come this close to influencing our day-to-day existence on such a massive scale. While some forms of technology can be credited with positive changes in our world, there has also been the negative effects of overuse, dependency and addiction to this technology. One of the most highly discussed and debated topics among parents today is screen time. How much is too much, and what impact will screens have on children's development? A US study in teenagers and young adults aged between 18 to 30 found that those with higher social media use and who are prone to social comparison are more than 3 times as likely to feel anxious, socially isolated, depressed, experience high levels of depression and anxiety than those who don't use social media as often. Because of some of these concerns, and that a young child's brain may be particularly sensitive to chronic exposure of smartphones, handheld tablets, computers and television, parents need to limit the screen time for young children. This is even more important in these uncertain times with schools opening and closing in line with COVID-19 restrictions. Online schooling has increased screen time for children and teenagers, and as such, parents must differentiate between what time is spent schooling online and recreational screen time. So what is the recommended recreational screen time per day? According to the Australian Communications and Media Authority in respect to cyber safety for education for children, 2 hours is the recommended recreational screen time. That's separate, obviously, to the online schooling that they're doing at the moment. In this respect, research by Macquarie University neuroscientist Professor Mark Williams states the more time children spend on digital devices, the less empathetic they are and the less they can process and recognise facial expressions, so their ability to actually communicate with each other is decreased. They require face-to-face engagement to understand and use verbal and non-verbal communication, develop empathy and learn turn-taking and more. As an experiment, a group of children spent 5 days at an overnight nature camp without a television, computers or smartphones. After 5 days, they demonstrated significantly better recognition of non-verbal, emotional and social cues than other children who continue their usual daily screen time, which suggests that time away from the screen can improve both emotional and social intelligence. Increased screen time and less reading time and communication in the real world is associated with poorer language development and executive functioning, particularly in the very young. In infants, increased screen time is one of the several factors that predict behavioural patterns within their first 12 months. As parents, we face unique challenges in protecting our children from the implications of new technologies and online applications. In a recent study conducted in the United States, 2/3 of parents stated that parenting is harder today than it was 20 years ago, with many citing digital technology like social media, smartphones and computers as a reason. Some of the most common responses tended to stress the impact of digital technology, the rise of social media, and how access to technology exposes children to things at a young age. Other commonly cited reasons for parenting growing more difficult included changing morals and values and the costs associated with raising a child. Australia has a population of 26.5 million people, with 90% of the population using the internet. And an interesting statistic for you as parents is that the top 4 social media platforms used by children aged 8 to 11 and teenagers aged 12 to 17 are: number 1, YouTube, 80% used by children and 86% used by teenagers. Number 2 is Facebook, 26% usage by children and 75% usage by teenagers. Number 3, Snapchat, 26% used by children and 67% by teenagers. And number 4 is Instagram, 24% children and 70% used by teenagers. So the research conducted by the Australian Communications and Media Authority in respect to cyber safety education for children reveals that children and teenagers use the internet for considerably different reasons. Children are more interested in individual pursuits such as playing games, whereas teenagers were more interested in social interactions such as chatting to friends. Do you know the minimum age before a user can create an account? Well, in Australia, it's 13 and in Europe, 16, 13 with parental consent. Now, these age limits are not law, but recommendations. Why 13, you may ask? It's simply to comply with the USA's Children Online Privacy Protection Act, which states that it's illegal for companies to obtain certain information and data from any child under the age of 13 without parental consent. So, if there are recommendations in respect to age limits, why do so many parents ignore them? While social media age limits help ensure that your child can handle each platform and their possible negative influences, you as a parent should make the final decision as to whether your child is mature enough to use these platforms, even if they are past the minimum age. You don't give them the keys to the car before you teach them to drive. Another study, a recent study in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, asserts that teen depression has increased by more than 60%. For children in ages between 12 to 13, depression rates increased by 47%. The researchers noted that the same upward trends in suicides, attempted suicides, and serious psychological distresses amongst youth as well. And while unable to clearly pinpoint the cause of this adolescent distress, in their summary, the study's authors point towards the digital age, saying more research needs to be done to understand the role of factors such as technology and digital media use upon the youth. The bottom line, if children don't get the help they need from their parents and their schools, then those rising depression rates may be our fault, not technology's. Two areas of concern that are becoming more and more prevalent amongst young people today are cyberbullying and sexting. Historically, bullying occurred within or near a school, a workplace, or in the neighbourhood. However, technology allows present-day cyberbullies to extend their reach and operate in an unconfined environment. Unlike traditional bullying, which stopped at school, cyberbullying can and does reach directly into the home. This exacerbates the victim's feelings of exclusion and isolation due to the perceived loss of the home as a refuge. It can be hard for parents to know whether a child is being bullied. A child might not want to tell anyone because they're scared the bullying will get worse, or they might think they deserve to be bullied, or it's their fault. As parents, we face these unique challenges in protecting our children from cyberbullying, as the implications of new technologies and online applications are often difficult to grasp. Did you know that in Australia, 59% of children experience cyberbullying? Similarly, sexting is an ever-growing concern to parents, which can have serious consequences for your child. Sexting is the use of the internet or mobile phone for creating, sharing, sending or posting sexually explicit messages or images, which is becoming more and more common, especially the distribution of naked or semi-naked photos. It's important to know as parents that sexting is illegal when it involves anyone under the age of 18 or distributing sexually explicit images without the other person's consent. A lot of this is due to the increasing use of technology with normal teen risk-taking behaviour and interest in sexual experimentation, particularly during this period where children are homeschooling and spending more time in the digital space. Young people's understanding of the consequences are low, or they may think they're exception and nothing bad will happen to them. It's easier to let your guard down on the phone or on the internet than it might be in person. So it's important that you as parents provide the requisite support and advice to your child by telling them that sexting is illegal and images can be difficult to remove once they are posted. Give them clear expectations in respect to the use of their devices and don't dismiss sexting as a prank. Did you know that the average age of a child who is exposed to online pornography is 8 to 11 years of age? That's right, 8 to 11 years of age. During this period of COVID-19, families around the world have been presented with a challenge that is unlike anything we have ever experienced before. Most parents, when confronted with a highly stressful situation like this, have a basic concern for the well-being and safety of their children, whatever their age. To care for children effectively, parents must also look after themselves. That is a very important point because as of you who are old enough to remember the good old days of travelling by air, as you can remember, prior to the takeoff, we received instructions by the flight attendant that in case of an emergency, you put your life jackets on first, because if you can't save yourself, you won't be able to save your children. The same concept applies here. COVID-19 has impacted us in many ways. For many parents, the boundaries between work and family life have changed, and balancing work and family responsibilities has never been more important. In addition, many families are facing additional stresses such as job insecurity, financial pressure, and uncertainty about the current situation. And whilst most teens won't be preoccupied with COVID-19 as adults, it is essential and incumbent upon us as parents that they know they can talk to us about their concerns and have their questions answered truthfully. Let your child know that when it comes to COVID-19, this difficult time, you are there for them. It's also important that during these times of stress and uncertainty to maintain some type of structure around you, and as much as possible, stick to your regular family routines, such as your meal times, your bedtimes, etc. Children and teenagers who are doing virtual schooling may become bored with staying at home and spend extra time using technology, feel isolated from their peers, and they may not understand the restrictions on their life. This increases in challenging behaviour in children, which are also common and place extra pressure on parents. All parents need to consider how to help their children through this time, and while also finding time to take a break and look after themselves. Calm and relaxed parents are more able to provide the safety and stability children need in these uncertain times. We are concerned about what our children are doing and who they are associated with, and rightly so. Yet they have the world at their fingertips in the comfort of their own room using technology, and we do little in the way we supervise them online. Who is raising the child, the parent or the internet? Just because they are in their room and on their digital device does not always mean they are safe. Remember that adolescence is a period of risk-taking. We need to be aware of the hidden dangers, especially from those individuals who trawl our social media sites, preying on and grooming young children. That's why it's essential to stay involved in your child's digital world, such as keeping up to date with the sites, the applications and online chat services they are using, and explore them together. Be a friend on whatever platform your child uses, and try to be aware of who they socialise with in the real world and who they know only in the virtual world. Remember that you are responsible for your children in the digital space. As parents, we need to be aware of the hidden dangers. Do not allow your children to have a mobile phone in their hand just so you can relax more and free yourselves from your responsibilities as a parent, as difficult as that may be. Children will make mistakes using the digital media, but try to handle these areas with empathy and turn a mistake into a teachable moment. Building an open, trusting relationship is critical to protect your children. Keep communication open and calm so they feel comfortable coming to speak with you if they have done something they regret or are being pressured by someone. And what are we doing to educate and raise our children with the right virtues? As parents, you need to set the boundaries along with age-appropriate rules early on so your children understand and recognise that there are limitations in what they can see and use with technology. If you leave it until they get older, such as in their teenage years, you will be facing an uphill battle because the 12 to 25 age brain is wired to pull away from parents. Use parental controls. They're controls which are software tools that allow you to monitor and limit your child, what your child sees and does online. They can be set up to do things like block your child from accessing specific websites or application functions, filter different kinds of content such as adult or sexual content, drugs and gambling, etc. Allow you to monitor your child's use of connected devices with reports on sites they visit and applications they use, how often and for how long, and set time limits, blocking access after a certain time period. Technology and social media are all around us. How do we manage the time our children spend on it? The most important step is to establish a balanced or sustainable relationship with technology, says social psychologist Adam Alter. As parents, it's important to support your children to balance that with physical exercise, learning and other types of play, and to make sure they leave enough time in their week for face-to-face time with people. And whilst there are many benefits of social media and technology for our children, it's incumbent on us as Orthodox Christians to balance this with their spiritual upbringing. The late great elder Emilianos, the former abbot of the monastery of Simonotra, described our time as the age of the technological revolution. He stated that the culture of information technology and its images are cunning distractions, swamped by millions of images and a host of different situations on television and in the media in general. People lose their peace of mind, their self-control, their powers of contemplation and reflection, and turn outwards, becoming strangers to themselves. To overcome this, our church fathers talk about spiritual vigilance, which arms us to stave off the disastrous effects of the technological society. According to the Apostle Paul, spiritual vigilance is a protection for everyone, containing everything good in this age and the age to come. So let us remember then the importance of vigilance in all things insofar as it concerns matters pertaining to the overall health of the soul, and especially for our children who utilise the vast resources of the internet and associated information technologies. In conclusion, are we as parents and Orthodox Christians acting as role models to our children? Children are naturally inquisitive and open, curious and appropriating. Their relationship to technology will be shaped early in their life. Their learning and thinking will be formed. This needs parental guidance and care. This is where parents need to be role models for their children. Indeed, our Orthodox Church stipulates that the role of parents is critical in raising children. The role of the parent must be able to provide children with moral instruction, shelter from harmful stimuli, and a prayerful environment that emphasises faith in God and reliance upon Him. At the same time, equip their children properly with technological savvy they will need as emerging Orthodox Christians, Christian adults in a world that will indeed ask much of them. Protect and empower your children, particularly whilst living in a society of impulsiveness and immediacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you very much for a very informative presentation. And obviously, this is much newer information compared to the one that you gave 2 years ago to our Sunday School Parents Group. So thank you very much. We, Gia, we have a few questions in the chat link. If you would like to go through one by one. Yes.
Yeah. So the first question is from Helen and Theo, and they asked, how can you control YouTube use on an iMac?
That's interesting. With any control of anything, whether it be YouTube or anything else, there's a number of areas you can go to. And I want to say it this way because it makes it easier, because there are a number of different ways you can do it. But there's those of you who have heard of the E-Safety Commissioner's website.
No, I haven't heard of that.
Helen, the E-Safety Commissioner's website is particularly got information for teachers and children about how to, teachers and parents about how to protect their children and what techniques you can use to block off a number of areas, as we mentioned before in my presentation. But there's something else that I've got earlier today. There's also a link you can go to called LineWise. I don't know if you've heard of it. LineWise was created, is a cyber safety hub, which was created specifically for parents who may find it struggling to have conversations with their children about their online experience and cannot provide guidance for their children. I highly recommend it to you, and a lot of the questions, and the question you've asked, a lot of the questions that others may have in mind, I highly recommend that particular site to go onto it online, and you'll find you'll have all the answers to all your questions.
The next question says, it's from Anna, and they say, thank you for taking the time to share this information. What app or software do you recommend for monitoring kids' internet usage and limiting what sites they can access?
I thought you were going to ask that one. I try to refrain from recommending applications because there's so many of them. And I prefer that the parents, there's so much information online about and on the web as to what application. There's some really good ones and there's some good ones. I prefer not to recommend anything, because if I do, and I have recommended something in the past which came back to haunt me because it didn't work out well for the parents, and they sort of blamed me for saying, well, you recommended it. So it depends on how you use it, what you want with it, and there's so many of them. There's actually literally thousands available. But again, if I can recommend you to the LineWise site and to the E-Safety Commissioner site, I can tell you the E-Safety Commissioner is one of the best ones for recommending use of applications to help block your sites. And it's got word-by-word descriptions of how you go through it. You can do it, whether it be on your mobile devices, on your computers or your iPads. So I don't have an answer to the question, but I said I don't want to get stuck in recommending what's best and what's not best, because everybody has different needs, and with this particular site to provide a whole host of applications which we are able to help parents decide in their unique circumstances which one would be best for their children. Because parents with different age children, younger children will probably need more security than, say, the older children, especially if you've got teenage children who are 16 and so forth. You'll have different type of issues with them. So it's important that when you look at that site, that'll explain a lot of those issues for you.
We don't have a question in the chat, but we do have just a recommendation from Theo Peter. He said, parents can also stop or pause internet connection, i.e. Optus gives us the ability to do this and it works. So that's another...
communication providers allow that. You can do that anywhere, but it just said again, it's you as parents have to decide on the age of your children what they can and can't have access to, what you want to block them from looking at, and if you want to set time limits as to their use when they have it, because you can use it. I know a lot of young kids that don't use their tablets and the iPads, especially when they're doing their school learning, but if you want to be able to stop them from spending too much time doing recreational use, you can set block times. Like I would recommend in these days, I wouldn't be allowing them to have any more than an hour of recreational time, screen time, because they're doing so much work at home on their iPads, and that's probably take another 4 or 5 hours additional to the recreational screen time that would normally do when they were actually at school.
Arthur, I've got one question. Obviously, as parents, and as a priest, you know, I get a lot of parents asking me this question. Obviously, we want to be friends to our children. We want to trust our children. Can you just please give us some tips and some advice on how far can we go with this trust? How do we speak to our children? How do we trust them in regards to technology usage? What would you recommend?
That's a good question, Father. It's a difficult one because, again, different parents have different expectations. I mean, for me, it's not being overly strict and being able to have, when I say friends, being able to have friendly relationships instead of having the big stick, because as we all know, the big stick may work to a certain degree, but unfortunately children, the more you get them to prevent them from using a particular application or site, the more they'll try behind your back. So it's important to support them. It's important to discuss the dangers with them, be upfront with them, be truthful with them, and tell them that you want to be friends with them, give them access, and set the ground rules early and be able to say, well, look, I'm happy for you to do things, because you can actually follow what they're doing and even have GPS technology on your own phone to know where they're going. You know, some people might say, well, you don't trust your child. Sometimes you can't be everywhere on the screen time and monitoring your children, them knowing about it. So whilst we've got to have some trust, there's also technology available where you as a parent can monitor what your children are doing without them knowing about it. For instance, what emails are they receiving? Where are they going to, if they got their mobile phone and they're going out meeting somewhere, because we want our children to be safe and we don't want to have show distrust of them, but we also want to make sure that they're also being truthful with us. Because as you know, that they might want to have friendship and good relationships with us, but once they get in with their peers and they're, you know, pressured to do things that they might not want to do, we won't know anything about it until, you know, either the school rings us or something happens, God forbid, or the police come and knock on our door. It's a difficult one, Father, because, you know, as I said, it depends on the age of your child, how much trust, your relationship with your children. Some parents haven't got good relationships, and that makes it even harder. But people, that's why I encourage that if you've got good relationship with your children, to sit down and talk to them, spend some time with them. Don't look at devices when you talk to them, and give them some freedoms. It's important that they do have freedoms. They need to be felt that you as parents trust them, and you want them to be able to have the technology. But again, see, kids, one thing that I found with children, and I know this from my wife being a principal at the St Spiridon, is that children need ground rules. And children crave to have instruction. So if you don't give them ground rules, if you don't make instruction, well, anything goes.
Thank you. There's another question from Maria Carasades. Do you know anything about a platform called Discord that children are using to communicate with their friends through gaming? Is there a way it can be disabled with time limits?
There's a few. I don't know specifically about that one, but any type of application, whether it be gaming or anything else, can be disabled through the use of blocking parental controls. And again, that depends on the app that you want to choose. If you go onto the E-Safety Commissioner's website, there's a number of applications that gives you there instructions of how to block your children from gaming online, because that is a huge problem at the moment. And we know from speaking, and I remember even when I was still in the police force, when we spoke to a number of the schools, one of the things that the children were doing when they were in behind the computer, the screen, someone would actually turn off the computer and actually either playing games or gaming online. And so I don't like to recommend particular applications, but there are a number of them on E-Safety Commissioner website. And I think it's important that you, who know your children better, to get on, have a look at those particular parental blocks and use the ones which think's more appropriate for yourselves. And they've got step-by-step instructions on your mobile phones, how you can, or on your iPads, as to how you can put those parental controls in place.
There is a follow-up question to the Discord question previously asked. Helen and Theo asked, is Discord in general safe for a 13-year-old to use?
Look, it's at 13 years of age, you know, I think you need some supervision. Is any application safe for a child to use? If it's controlled appropriately, yes, it is safe. If it's not, well, anything goes. So it's about the the parental controls we put in place. You can't just have. If I can make a suggestion, if you can avoid having your children having the devices in the room on their own. And I know it might not be appropriate for everybody, but if you can keep them in a place in the house where you have access, and everybody's like a common room or a common place in the house where you can watch it. It'll make it easier for you to have some sort of control over what your children are doing online. And don't let your children take their phones to bed, because I've been told about horror stories about that. They put under their pillow and they're up. Once they go to their room, they're up all night playing on their phones, getting online, chatting to friends, and doing things that you as parents have no idea about.
There is one more question, and it's asking, so they said, I've noticed late teen girls do use social media for chatting for well in excess of 2 hours. How do we limit this to 2 hours a day? Should we set up a schedule of, say, 1 hour after lunch and 1 to 1.5 hours after dinner?
Look, there's no set way of doing it. Again, it's what's comfortable with you and in consultation with your children. I said you can use parental controls to do it, but it's probably preferable if you actively supervise them, talk with them, and get them to agree that, yes, you can have an hour, whether it's in the morning, whether it's in the afternoon, whether it's lunchtime or another hour in the evening. That's a matter for yourselves. But it's important that you supervise and limit their screen time. And if it can be done in a consolidated fashion with your child, it's going to make it a lot easier. But again, as I said in my presentation, I think setting the boundaries and the rules early on is very important, because your child will follow them. Of course, as we know, children like to be risk takers, especially they get in their teenage years, and they'll like to see if they can get around what their parents tell them to do. But ultimately, you've got to set those ground rules, and how you set them in relation to meeting that screen time. It's a matter for yourselves, but don't forget that in the last 7 weeks they've been at home, they're on schooling, they're spending a lot of time on screens. So it's important to be able to also interject and let them go out and play for a while, away from all of it, away from recreational time and so forth, do a bit of running around and, go to a park and even play with some children that they might know that live nearby. So I think it's important to have that break, have a bit of exercise, rather than maybe stopping their online schoolwork and then going directly to doing recreational time, whether it be chatting online or to be able to, play games. I know sometimes their friends might not be close and they want to chat to them. That's okay, but as you as parents then have to supervise what time periods they'll be able to spend chatting to their friends online.
Arthur, can I just ask a question? I get a lot of obviously concerned parents asking advice for online bullying. When do you think it's obviously, I'm sure that all of our children somehow, especially with these chat lines they have with friends from school, when do you think it's appropriate for parents to intervene or maybe speak to the school if there is online bullying happening?
Look, if there's online bullying happening and you're aware of it as parents, your child will show, some children might show no symptoms, but when your child starts, stressing, becoming withdrawn, not wanting to eat, not wanting to spend any time then on online with anybody else, there's some of the telltale signs that say, well, something's going on. So you need to talk to your children about it and see whether there is any pressure on them. In a nice way, empathetically, try to help them. And if you feel that you do have concerns, because a lot of the times you'll find that the teachers, depending on the schools they go to, and I know this from speaking with my wife, that a lot of the teachers know what the children are doing, and they do have some good contact with them, and they're also aware of what's happening on screen. Now, if there's anything that they become aware of in relation to cyberbullying, you'll find that they will contact you. So if you feel as a parent that there's something wrong with your child, they're not telling you, certainly I think it's probably a good idea to go to your school and discuss it with them, and they might have information there that they'll be able to discuss with you and let you know. But it's a very, very difficult topic, that one, because, as I said, children react in different ways. Some might want to come out and tell, some are afraid, some don't want to let their parents know, some feel the pressure that if they tell, they're going to get hostility when they go back to the school, if the bullying person finds out. But my response to that is you've got to try and block them and don't respond back to for any bullying. It's important that your children or anyone responds back to them, because that's what they want, looking for responses. So don't respond, and if it's affecting your child's well-being and welfare, by all means, you need to take action, and you need to go initially speak to the school. And if it becomes worse than that, obviously, and if there's, if it's life-threatening or anything, obviously go to the police. It's a big concern, really. I'm trying not to make it as if I'm not a pessimist or an alarmist, but I'm just wanting you to know that it is a big issue with children today. It is occurring a lot, especially in downtime. And we found that especially during school holidays, when the children have got more time to spend online, and if the parents are working, not supervising closely, there's a lot more reported cases of cyberbullying during that period of time.
There is another recommendation in the chat for another service that another family uses. So they use Family Link, and they said that they use it when setting up their kids' tablet, and it limits their time, like their screen time. It locks at a certain time, and then it kind of helps parents with like authority for installing apps or games.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another good recommendation there. And then there's another question, and it's basically asking, as parents, how can we control ourselves? And I'm going to reframe it a little bit as how can we be good examples for our children or our grandchildren on how long we should be on our digital devices or on our social media, or just what we should do. How can we be good examples to children for that?
Okay. So before I answer that, I've actually got a piece of paper in front of me that you can't see, but I had written, I said I don't like saying it, but it knew it'd come up, but I'm glad that they raised one of the best ones I've got here. The application was Family Zone. So again, I'm not recommending it. All I'm saying is the other family that raised it, that's one of the ones that I had actually had as number one on my piece of paper here as the application that will help you with protecting your children from the use of the iPads and other technology. Look, going back to that question, Gia, I think we need to be role models. When I say role models, it's how we conduct ourselves. If we're spending all our time or a lot of time using social media, or if our children are trying to talk to us to get advice and we're looking at our phones or watching the television, well, we're not being good role models. It's important. Children aren't silly, particularly at a young age. They usually pick up a lot of things up until the age of 8 years of age, like sponges. They can see our behaviour. So our behaviour is very, very important. And the way that we act, the way that we present ourselves, the way that we do things, those children will look at us and mimic that behaviour. And I remember when I went to Mount Athos and I spoke to a couple of very holy elderly monks there, the important things, as well as, I've got to say, Elder Freeman in Arizona, and I asked them about some of these issues as well at the time for my children. They said the same thing to me. It was very important about you being the role model, you being about able to be truthful with your child, being able to set boundaries with your children, but more importantly, prayer is very important. And don't lose your temper if you can with your child. Be empathetic towards it. Try and build a very trusting relationship. But your actions as a parent will be mimicked by your children. So that's why I stress that. That's why the Orthodox Church stresses the importance of role modelling by us as parents to their children, because the way you behave and the way you portray yourself is going to be very important to your children in the way that they're raised and the way that they behave in the future. Of course, they're influenced by their peers. I don't say that won't happen, but I know that in the case, if I can use my children, for example, many times now that they're all grown adults, remember the way that I said certain things to them, the way that I responded to them, and they use these things now to help grow their children. So, as I said, our behaviour as role models and the way that we raise our children, particularly with technology, if we're telling them don't spend much time on it, we're limiting the recreation time, and then on the other hand, we've got our mobile phones sitting down in the lounge watching TV, playing on the phone in one end and having an iPad in the other. Well, what sort of example is that to show our children? So it starts all with us. Be good role models. Practice what you preach, and I'm sure that your children will be aware of it and follow that. And just be aware. It's very important to be aware of what your children are doing if they're going into their rooms to be on the computer. Because they will take risks. They do take advice from some of their friends, and they like to follow what their friends are doing. But just be aware of. It's very important to be aware of who your children are socialising with, as I said, in the real world, and who they are associating with in the virtual world. Because the scary part is that there has been many instances. I can tell you now, and I don't want to scare you or alarm you, but this is reality, where children, as young as 14 or 15, have met people online, and that they've actually gone out and met in person without telling their parents.
Wow.
So it's very challenging times for all of us. There's no set or easy answers. And I think that we all know that, you know, as parents, it is a difficult time to raise our children. It's a difficult time in the current climate, very much so, especially with those who have them at home. Have to do some, you know, a school learning with them and helping them get through the day. It's very stressful, but we need to remain as calm as we can, and we need to be practical role models.
Arthur, one more question. I'm sorry. Again, it's from discussion with parents. I've and obviously with teaching scripture and asking the children what games, because when you ask them what hobbies they like, it's usually the boys that say, "I love playing computer games," and when they you ask them what type of games they're playing, it's always Fortnite, all these very violent games. So obviously, what do you recommend in regards to games? Should we be allowing our kids to play games that promote gang violence, shooting, all these things?
Look, my personal, I guess my answer to that would be this: that you allow your children, if they're under 15, to watch, you know, mature age films and videos that show a lot of violence and sexual, implicit sexual scenes. I don't think so. So again, with videos and games they play, some of the games today that I've seen are very, very violent, you know, very, very bloodthirsty. Personally, as a grandparent, I mean, I can't control what my children do with their children, but I know that they're very, very fussy in what they allow their children, because they tell me what their children can do and what games they can play online, depending on what their age group. Certainly, if a child gets to 16, 15, 16, 17, that age group, it's very, very difficult then to control them. And all you can do is advise them and be truthful with them. But it's difficult to say, well, you can't play that game, because you will find that they will go away, and when they're not with you, they're with their friends, they will play with these games. So the other challenges we have now, it's not like when I was a young person, I'm a lot older than most of you, my parents knew what I was doing, so I could go and play outside and ride my bike, or we would play touch footy and so forth. Now your child has a device, and if it hasn't got those parental controls on it, they can go away and go with their friends. So we go out with their friends, and they can do whatever they like without you knowing it, if you haven't got the parental controls in place.
Yeah, well, times have changed, haven't they? I remember when I was a teenager, you know, my favorite game would be like Age of Empires or something, you know, and I would feel guilty when, you know, you would obviously have a battle and but things are very different now. Like you see, these games are very violent, gang related, you know, how to rob banks, how to speed cars, and all this behavior that is adding to the kids' behavior. Like they're becoming more violent. It's harder to get our kids off a computer game, a game that they're using. Well, I remember if you know, our parents, if they said get off, you know, you get off. Now it's like you have to tell them like 4 or 5 times for them eventually to stop playing a game. And a lot of parents have that issue where it's very hard to get the kids off the game that they're playing on their iPad. So yeah,
it's not easy, Father, for all of us, and especially for the younger parents, and even us as grandparents now, because it is a different world. And again, as I said, it depends on what you've allowed your children to get away with as they're younger, because if you give them too much room, it's hard for them to go back and take control of that. So if you set the limitations and the boundaries early on, as I said, they'll grow up with that, and they can work within those boundaries. If you want to expand them later as they get older and more trust between you can do that, but you can't give them everything when they're younger and then say, well, hang on a minute, you can't have that anymore and take it away. It becomes a lot more difficult. So we don't like to upset our children. We like to, particularly some of us who have grown up when our parents worked very well off at the time. They were working 2 or 3 jobs, they were away, and they wanted to bring us up to have everything. I think one of the problems that we're having today, and something that my discussions with some of these elders in Mount Alpha, is we allow our children to have too much. And when they have too much, really they become insatiable. They want more and more and more, and that's not good for our children either. We need to be able to set those boundaries, because I can tell you, children, they won't say it at the time, but they will be able to tell you later that I'm glad you set those boundaries, because whilst I didn't like it at the time, it did help me when I was growing up. And I said, as I said, if I use my own children as an example, they said that to me many times. They weren't happy, but Dad, you did set those boundaries, and that taught us a lot at the time. And we're glad now that you did, because we would. And they try. Don't get me wrong. Children will push you as parents to the limits, and they want to be able to push those boundaries to see how far they can push you and what they can get. But you need to be able to stand your ground. And again, be truthful with them. My view is, and as they get older, and it's harder to control them, as you know, the most important thing you can do is provide them with open and honest advice. They can either take that advice or they can leave it. But at least if you're open with them and you advise them the right way, they can't come back to you at a later stage and say, listen, you never told me I could do that, or I couldn't do that. So they'll want to blame you anyway. So, yeah, parenting, as I said, with that study I did in the United States, parents were very frustrated and found it very, very difficult raising children today with technology, because there is a blur there. And many of us, particularly ones that are working all day and want to come home and chill out, and as parents I'm talking about now, sometimes they find it difficult to spend time with the children, even spend a bit of time to talk with them, because they've had a long day tomorrow. They get there early. Sometimes you want to come down and just crash and watch TV and have your time out. So it's very, very, very difficult. And I don't blame parents for being, very stressed. And we all want our children to have a lot and want them to be able to play on their games and have all the greatest technology. But trust me, if I can tell you this, I can tell you as a fact, because I've learned something in the police force. I won't say how I found out, but Bill Gates and when he was alive, Steve Jobs really restricted the time that their children spent on the devices, and in fact didn't allow their children to have any device until they were older than 10 years of age. So what does that tell you? Well, they're addictive. These and they've been proven. There's been a number of studies done that say that too much prolonged use on any type of device, whether it be a mobile phone, whether it be playing games or whatever, can become an addiction. An addiction is very hard to break.
Correct. Thank you, Arthur. One last question, and I think we'll stop there. Jaya says there are so many times where we see people leaving a child with a phone from a very young age as a way to distract them and make them sit still. How could we break away from using the phone as a habit of distraction?
Don't give them a phone.
What's the age, appropriate age to, because obviously children from year 4 and onwards, they start bombarding their parents. I want a phone, I want a phone, I want a phone. What would you...
Why would children, I mean, this is the question I'm going to ask you as parents, why would children in primary school need phones? Why would you even allow them to take a phone to school? If something happens, a teacher will contact you.
Yeah.
There's no need for a child that's, 8, 9, 10, 11 years of age to have a phone with them. You shouldn't teach them that young. I mean, I know sometimes parents feel pressured because, Freddie down the road's got it, or Steve's got it, or Sherry's got it, so my child has to have it. But to me, that's wrong, because high school may be a bit different, because they can use phones to do research and so forth. But in primary school, I can't see any reason why your children need to have a phone.
I agree. Yeah. High school obviously is another issue, but primary school, but yet we see so many children having phones and have access to all these apps and Facebook and Instagram, and even doing like videos.
TikTok's a classic.
TikTok, yeah.
And it's very dangerous, TikTok, but there's a lot of young people and a lot of older people. I think in Australia, there's about 3 million users, not just on TikTok alone. Yeah. So we've got to be careful about these applications, as I said to you before. So be mindful of that, ladies and gents. I don't want to prolong things, but be very mindful and don't be afraid to make difficult decisions with your children. If you make them for the right reasons, they will appreciate it later on in life.
Okay, all right. 2 more questions because these are important. The first one is from Joanne. Up until what age is it legally acceptable to go through your child's phone and chats?
Forever. There's no, you can do it forever if you want. It doesn't matter. There's no real age. Look, obviously if they're 16 and so forth, above, older than 16, probably makes it a bit difficult, but there's no age limit. I mean, if you're the parent, if you want to look at something, I mean, you can do it. I don't say to do it this way, but you can do it, covertly, if I can put it like that. But there is no age. I mean, if you've got concerns, you can confront your children as well about it. Don't be afraid to confront them about some of the things they're doing. I think sometimes as parents we can tippy-toe on, eggshells, so we don't, upset our children, but that's not the case. I think that sometimes you need to have, difficult conversations with your children.
Yeah. And look, we'll have to stop to the next question, then that's it. So Helen and Theo, what age at high school do you recommend? I guess to give them a phone? Is that what you're asking, Helen? Yeah. At what age?
I don't recommending ages, but if you're going to before 15, I wouldn't give them any phone. And even at 15, you have to ask yourself: what is the reason why your child has requested a phone?
Yeah, I guess you're right. Look, some parents, obviously it's a safety issue, especially if their children are catching a bus to school. But obviously, like most of the children, it's you have to question, why do they need a phone?
Under protection of the teachers have said that. I know from working when I was a local commander, I worked with many of the schools, and the teachers were very prompt in anything happening to your child. They would contact the parents straight away and let them know. So is there a reason? I know with many of the schools, particularly the independent schools, that the children have to leave their phones at the front. Can't take them to the classroom with them, and they can't have them throughout the day unless there's some sort of emergency that they feel they need to contact their parent.
Yeah. Yes, correct.
And if you're concerned about their safety, can I just say this? I know it might sound okay, but just give them a simple phone. It's got a smartphone, so they can use emails, technology, and the internet.
Kids are very smart now, Arthur. You can't trick them with a simple Nokia phone anymore.
No, I'm saying that if you're concerned about their safety, well, they just want to be able to contact you. Just give them a simple phone.
Of course. Okay, so I think we'll finish there. Any concluding remarks, Arthur, that you would like to make before we finish?
No, all I want to say is thank you, Father, and to His Grace Bishop Milianos, and all parents for allowing me to present for you tonight. There's a lot more to this particular topic. This is only a very small summary that I thought were probably some of the more important things that I wanted to present to you. It is a difficult world that we live in now. It's a changed environment that I grew up in, and it's becoming more and more difficult, and technology is added to the difficulty. So I don't envy you as parents, but as I said, it's important for you to act as role models. It's important for you to make difficult decisions, and while your children might not like it at the time, it will hold them in good stead later on. And please, again, be good role models, be trusting with your children, but also put on those appropriate boundaries that make sure that they keep them as safe as possible.
Thank you very much, Arthur. And just wanted to say a big thank you, as well as you said, to His Grace Bishop Emilianos and all the wonderful members from Go Family and Friends and Go Youth and Go Teens who have joined us here tonight. We have recorded this talk, so hopefully soon, in a few days, we'll be able to share it on our Facebook page. And please once it's online, please pass it on to your family and friends so they can hear about this very important topic. We'll finish off with prayer. Διευχών των Αγίων Πατέρων ημών, Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ο Θεός, ελέησον και σώσον ημάς. Αμήν.